Hey, 8th graders, this is Mrs. Shopper coming to you with the second half of chapter 4, the first section. We're going to get into proving triangles congruent, and we're going to start learning about some of the reasons we can use when we're setting up our proofs. So today we're going to be talking about side, 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 and side, angle, side. Everything we're talking about today is brand new, so it's important that you pause throughout the video to make sure you get things written down and that you're studying it, you're getting them on note cards, and so on. So here we go. Side, side, side. We can prove triangles congruent by proving that all three pairs of congruent or corresponding sides are congruent. So in this case, we were able to show that sides AB and DC are congruent, and that BC and EF are congruent, and that AC and DF are congruent. And by saying all three pairs of corresponding sides are congruent, we can then make a congruent statement that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF, keeping in mind that angle A and angle D are corresponding, angle B and angle E are corresponding, and that angle C and angle F are corresponding. You must write them in the correct order. Notice the note card in the upper right-hand corner. That means that you need to be getting this into your note card. So, can we prove that these triangles are congruent? And the answer is yes. Okay. So, go ahead and take a moment to sketch this into your notes, and I'm going to show you how you can prove them congruent. So, we just talked about side, side, side. So, I've got two triangles here. I have triangle DQU and triangle UAD. And we want to see if they're congruent. And when I look at this, I see that segment QD is congruent to segment UA. And I see that segment QU is congruent to segment AD. With that, I can also say that segment UD from this triangle is congruent to segment UD, of this triangle. So we can say that UD is congruent to UD. And if you recall from an earlier chapter, we're allowed to do this because of the reflexive property of congruence. All right. And now that we were able to show that all three pairs of sides are congruent, we can say that triangle UAD is congruent to triangle. Okay, so U and D correspond, and A and Q correspond, and then D and U correspond. The order in which I write them does matter. Now, I could also have said triangle ADU and triangle QUD, or triangle DAU and triangle UQD. But making sure that those pair up is important. All right, so this next one is determining whether two triangles on a coordinate plane are congruent. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sketch it. Anytime you do something on a coordinate plane, I would really like you to have graph paper because I think that that is going to help you with your process. So it was on your supply list at the beginning of the year. Where it is at the moment, I'm not quite sure, but make sure that you find some graph paper and use that, okay? So here we go. I'm going to plot these out. I don't have graph paper in Notability. I know I can bring a page in, but it does the whole thing. So here we go. -5, 5 is A, 0, 3 is B, and -4, 1 is C. And D is going to be 6, -3, 1, -1, and 5, 1 is right here. That's F. And we want to know, are these two triangles congruent? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out, the distance formula, something we talked about earlier and last year. And I'm going to see if each of these triangles are congruent. So in an effort to save time, I already have all their measurements using the distance formula. Keeping in mind that the distance formula is the square root of the quantity x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus the quantity y sub 2 minus 1 squared. This should be a formula that you have memorized. You learned it last year. We talked about it at the beginning of the year, and we talked about it again in a lesson. So at this point, this shouldn't be something that you have to keep referring back to. You need to have this one memorized. When I went through and used this formula, I got that the measurement of AB is the square root of 29, and BC is the square root of 20, and AC is the square root of 17, and EF is the square root of 20, and FD is the square root of 17, and ED is the square root of 29. And I notice that all of those sides have a partner. So I can say triangle DEF is congruent to, and this is where I need to kind of match. So D and A go together. So D to E is along this side that's the square root of 29. So A to B. And then F and C are congruent. So DEF is congruent to A, B, C. And that's how you list it out. All right, side angle side is the other way that we're going to talk about today. It's abbreviated as SAS. That means you have a side, an angle, and a side. And the angle has to be the angle that connects the two sides that you're talking about. If you have a side angle side and two triangles congruent, then you can say that it's true. So we have side AB and ED. We have angle B and angle E. And we have BC and EF. So we can say these two triangles are congruent because of side, angle, side. All right, so let's apply this. The wings of one type of moth forms two triangles. E and EI is congruent with FH. So EI is congruent with FH. G is the midpoint for both EI and FH. Okay, so if EI and FH is the midpoint, I know that these are congruent, and I know that these are congruent. Okay, now I also know, because I want to know if I can prove these congruent, I also remember from an earlier lesson that we learned about vertical angles. We learned what they are, and we learned that they're congruent. So FGE is congruent to angle IGH. So when I look at this, I can prove the two triangles congruent by side, angle, side, because FG is congruent to GH, and angle FGE is congruent to angle HGI, and that IG is congruent to GE. And because I have those two sides and the angle that connects them, I can say that it's possible to prove those congruent. So your task is to work on these problems. Keep in mind that before you submit it, the expectation is that you score it. Mark each problem as correct or incorrect. You've shown your work, and you put your score at the top of the paper. I will chat with you all soon. Take care.